Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and as most of you know, I am the voice and the astrologer on this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. I have my cat here because she doesn't want to get out of my lap. But there's a couple of things I want to say before I get into this week's forecast post the eclipse, which is one, I'm still offering the eclipse special until the 21st of this month. So if you want to book that, you can. It's on my website. The other thing that I want to do is I want to do a special each month that runs until the 21st of each month, which is, it's about to be Taurus season. So anybody who's a Taurus this next coming month, on the 21st, I will start that brand new special. And if it's your birthday month, you can come see me for $75. And then I'll do that each month for each one of the zodiac signs as a way to interact with you guys more. I love doing readings for people. It's just so much fun for me. I love getting to know the people who are on the other side of this screen. I feel like, I don't know you guys' faces, but you guys know mine. And so I even had a client this week bring up like the parasocial relationship of it. And I I want to connect with you guys. I want to see the faces behind the screen who are, supporting my work and who are getting something out of it. It really just fills my heart up with joy. So I'm going to be doing that. I was like trying to think about what do I want to do for the people who watch me. So anyway, without further ado, let me talk about this week. So if you want to update yourself on the eclipses, there are videos out there. I also did a video with my really good friend B, who's known as the Zine Witch. We did a conversation over the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction, and it was just an organic conversation of two friends who are astrologers talking about it. I'm definitely going to be doing a solo conversation where I go over that aspect and all of the astrological conversations going down. So I did a written report for this. I will put it in the link. I feel like I've talked and updated you guys on everything you need to be updated about. So here we go. Yesterday and today, Mars and Saturn are in a conjunction in the sign of Pisces. So to me, when we're looking at Mars and Pisces, it's a really interesting phenomenon. So on the one hand, Mars wants to be courageous and to act. It's like always forward moving. It wants to see, oh, there's lots of hair. It wants to look at the future. It wants to always be on the go because Mars are the conscious desires emanating from within our soul. And so everything amounts to desire. Think about it in life. Like you wanted to buy a new house, you desired to, and you figured out a way to do it. You wanted to be in a relationship and you weren't, and you desired it, and you figured out a way to get into a relationship. You wanted to have children, figuring out some way to have a child, whether it be adoption or anything. There's all of these different dynamics how Mars can show up in our life stemming from the desires that are emanating from our soul. And those desires are really about a choice. There are some desires we're meant to act on and some desires we aren't. Maybe we're exhausting them. Inside of the sign of Pisces with Mars there, this can be where we're coming to understand that we have exhausted a lot of the desires, or that some desires just need to be fantasies, right? That can play out within our minds. Even look at that on a sexual level. I'm sure a lot of people have had fantasies and then they don't have to actually act them out because they exhaust them within their mind. It's a really interesting phenomenon when we're looking at Mars and Pisces, or even in someone's natal chart with Mars in the 12th house. So Mars in the sign of Pisces can also be where we feel powerless to act on something that we're really being called to act on. In its most natural expression, this can be where we become universal, like a universal icon, or where we, you know, um, become an instrument of something much larger than ourselves as a way to help or to provide or to be a mirror for other people to see that it can be done. There's all different ways that Mars and Pisces can manifest. But with Mars and Pisces conjunct Saturn and Pisces, this is really about looking at our desires that have stemmed from our conditioning, what our ideals are, and as it's moving over Saturn, like it is today, it's going to be in a new phase conjunction. It's looking at, as these old desires that stem from our conditioning, what new desires that are more universal are coming and seeding into our consciousness right now, because Saturn and Pisces has very much been about dissolving old structures within our consciousness that are related to, and I've said this before, man-made laws. And if you really break that down, we're thinking about our ideals. That's a great Pisces word. And an ideal that stems from our learned beliefs, values, and needs, our conditioning, that can be man-made, is an ideal of what is the most idealistic relationship that you want to have, what is the most ideal job you want to have, what would that look like? And if it's structured around these man-made conditions, this learning around it, we can sometimes experience, because we typically give ultimate meaning to these things because we're taught to do that, right? If you do this, you'll be happy. And then people wonder why, like, they're getting divorced or this or that. And it's because it doesn't make you happy, because it's more of a mainstream ideal. It's not pertinent to necessarily your own soul's evolutionary growth until, I mean, it is, but it needs to be exhausted, because those are more temporal values. Where really the lesson in this Mars conjunct Saturn and Pisces is dissolving these old things in order to understand what are timeless and universal, ways to structure our consciousness, and what are the desires that emanate from that after this restructuring process has come along. What is universal and timeless in nature? That can be, I want to be of service to help the whole, instead of, being elitist, or this is about me and exclusionary. It can be where we're starting to understand that there's more natural ways of being in partnership than a codependent relationship. Most of us are taught that codependency, we have this ideal relationship that we do everything together, and we go on these trips and we like the same things and this and that. And really, that's where, like, we don't understand our own values because we've taken on each other's. And that's kind of dealing with this whole South Node in Libra, and also that Libra lunar eclipse that's wanting to wrap up. So all this work that we're doing consciously and understanding during this time of the eclipse, during this eclipse period, it's now, there's like this, in order to start this new phase of evolution, eclipse in Aries, during a new moon, a solar eclipse, and then this Mars passing over Saturn in a new phase conjunction. It's like, what is wanting to dissolve within our structure of how we've structured reality? What doesn't feel right? What have we experienced around our ideals and how we had desires to experience that? So it's this process of wanting to understand all of this in order to dissolve and start something new. This is really interesting because both of these planets, Mars and Saturn, during this conjunction, started yesterday, is happening today as well, are in conjunct the South Node in Libra. So it's like looking at how some of our ideals that have structured our reality because we've been taught this is what you do. And so we've desired to act upon it because, yeah, this sounds really great. Let me go out and try it. You know, now we're seeing that, oh, we've given ultimate meaning to it and it really doesn't have meaning anymore. Like, what is there? We've seen it time and time again. And so it creates an extreme, right? And so there's this inconjunct happening because it's highlighting like where's the extremes that have gone on in your life revolving around your desires that have been wrapped up in the illusion of a fantasy or an ideal, something that's overly idealistic, where you've given it ultimate meaning. Venus in Aries now is the ruler of this South Node. So again, it's this like we're working on self-improving and like really consciously working with this and self-reflecting with that Saturn and seeing what comes in and is seeded into our consciousness revolving around new desires that help us really understand where illusions and delusions were held within our ideals that have been learned. Venus in Aries is like, okay, but we need to learn new values. We need to learn more about what it is we need. And so that Venus wants us to act on what it is that we're now desiring, considering that that Venus is ruled by that Mars and Pisces. What's universal? What's timeless? What feels good to my soul? What do I want to act on? That Venus is also the ruler of Jupiter and Uranus, both in Taurus, that are approaching an exact conjunction that is going to happen on the 21st. But it's like this time of, I need to dissolve the old in order to objectify it so I can transform my relationship to myself. That's the Taurus dynamic. The objectivity is Uranus. So I can expand upon my own personal truths. That's the Jupiter. So I can expand on my relationship to self. But I can't just sit here and do it. I've got to create action. And that's what this Venus in Aries is speaking to. In order to refine and self-improve upon where extremes have played out in our life, dealing with our ideals, we need to create new action. And that means really having discernment around what is it that I need to act upon that I'm desiring to do, and asking oneself. This is a great dynamic dealing with Saturn, is it has a Capricorn feel. So it's asking oneself and answering your own questions, like, and making a correct judgment call. So asking yourself, like, is this something that I am being idealistic about? Is this something where I'm giving it ultimate meaning instead of fostering healthier self-esteem? Am I thinking that this is going to make me feel good? Am I externalizing my value if I act on this? These are all really great questions to ask, because then you can discern if it's correct for you. Now, if this is more about like learning or whatever, and you have desires to maybe go to a yoga class to ground into your body, to heal, maybe you're needing to learn more about how your body functions. It's wanting to kind of pull in this Virgo dynamic from that Pisces energy. Maybe you're wanting to learn more about your body, or something's been going on and you want to heal it. Maybe you have desires to really understand what it takes, and that can create a new value around your self-esteem and your self-worth, while also giving you more natural resources along the way. Like, you will hold that wisdom within you as you learn. And it also gives this feedback of like, that doesn't feel right for me. So what's the next step? And to take it step by step. And this is really this kind of conversation of exhausting these extremes through really understanding and self-reflecting on how these have been created, how they've been manifesting in our lives. And is this temporal? Is this mainstream? Because most people, I don't think that I probably have anyone that's necessarily exactly mainstream that watches me. I think that it's more people who are wanting to think for themselves, or who are wanting to spiritualize. So, but here's the thing, is we all have conditioning. We all come in with conditioning to work with. It's something that we're actually supposed to use at our disposal to learn more about ourselves. And whenever we think about it, it's actually really beautiful. So there's that dynamic. Then today, Thursday, as well, we have Mercury retrograde conjunct the Sun and Aries, both ruled by Mars and Pisces, and this is happening at 22 degrees, the conjunction. And to me, if you think back to last month during the 24th, I believe, I have it in my written report, but I believe it's the 24th. This was the same degree that Mercury was at then. So if there's something that has been going on in your life that you are wanting to express yourself about, or there's something from that time, this can be a day where it gets illuminated, like some information around that can be illuminated. Considering it's Mars in Pisces that's ruling it during this conjunction, it can be maybe something that you're understanding around that Mars Saturn dynamic I was talking about. Maybe it's something that you have come to understand about an illusion that's gone on in your life. A great way to put this is like, I think because of all the this whole nodal axis, I keep going back to relationships as an example because I feel like that's so pertinent for people right now. But this can be where maybe you ended a relationship and you're really wanting to be in it again, you know, but if you think about it and you reflect on it, those problems that created the ending, the separation, had always been there. And you just ignored them, or you made excuses for them, and you know, gave it some type of meaning that wasn't grounded in actual reality and truth. That is part of Pisces, Mars, Saturn dynamic. And so there's this thing where it can almost be illuminated, where it comes back to where you can take responsibility for yourself. This can also be, I talked about this last week, where Mercury retrograde and the sign of Aries can be about, I really need to have a hard conversation and I'm really afraid. How do I do this? How do I get the courage to do this? And so there can be this ability to all of a sudden understand exactly what it is that you're needing to say and how you want to say it that feels responsible, integral, and it's going to help dissolve the old dynamic. Maybe that person, if you have this conversation, it doesn't necessarily change them. It's not supposed to. This isn't a conversation to control an outcome. It's more of a distorted Libra dynamic. Maybe it's something that really can empower you because it's something you haven't done before. You're not used to having the hard conversations. Maybe you suppress your voice. Maybe you're afraid because you're afraid that someone's not going to listen to you or understand you. But here's the thing. When we express ourselves, there's a lesson. Like, though, whoever we express whatever it is, they can do whatever they want with that information, and that feedback that they give us from how they react to that conversation actually helps us ground in reality and the truth. So you see how this is all working out this week with this Saturn, Mars, Mercury retrograde, all of, you know, the Mercury retrograde conjunct the Sun, ruled by that Mars that's conjunct that Saturn. This is like where we can be terrified, but the need to lean into that, because that's something that is like us standing on the precipice of a dynamic that's going to help us evolve and move forwards. It definitely can be where we get to understand our emotional dynamics deeper, and why maybe we are afraid, why maybe we repress or suppress our voice. And that leads me to also today, we also have Pluto at 1 degrees Aquarius. Tomorrow it will move to 2 degrees, where it will stay there until it is retrograde, but it's at 1 degrees in Aquarius, and it is conjunct Kassandra exact. And that means that Kassandra, the asteroid, and Pluto are both ruled by Uranus and Taurus, and Uranus and Taurus is ruled by that Venus and Aries. There's like, it's kind of like this whole thing is speaking to something, which is really interesting because Kassandra is this asteroid that I see it so often in people's natal charts, are really strong Cassandras, usually women, sometimes men, but often women, where they are working and learning how to reclaim their voice and the need to reclaim their inner voice in order to reclaim their outer voice, to not suppress it or deny it. And it's usually because there has been some type of dynamic seen in that Cassandra in a natal chart where, whether it be early in life or in prior lifetimes, that they have used their voice and they were not believed. They were not heard. They were not seen. They were looked at as crazy, or they had some type of knowledge that you know, created by no wrongdoing of their own, insecurity within the people that they were sharing it with, and so they were scapegoated because of it, because those people wanted to have willful ignorance and deny it or not look at it. I mean, I've seen it time and time again. See it with people who have spoken up about sexual assault. I have seen it with people who would tell their parents about things and their parents didn't want to hear them because their parents wanted to keep the status quo going, and so those kids were later on as adults scapegoated often. I mean, I've seen it where someone who had some type of knowledge that was meant to help the consensus evolve, it challenged the consensus. A great example would be Share Height with her height report. She has a very strong Cassandra in her chart. And with the height report, she was absolutely ostracized by men and ended up denouncing her US citizenship, and she lives in a different country now. So there's all of these dynamics when someone has a very strong Cassandra in their chart where they're recovering their voice, they're using it in this lifetime, or maybe it's been stomped down in this lifetime. And so there's this need to really pay attention to their inner voice in order to recover their ability to express some type of truth, some type of knowledge. So when we're looking at the myth of it, we can see all of these dynamics play out in the myth of Cassandra. And I went into the myth of Cassandra in my written report. I will briefly go over it before I tell you what I'm seeing with this Cassandra conjunct Pluto while a Mercury retrograde is going down. So I think my cat is asleep. So Cassandra was the daughter of King Priam and of Troy, and this is a Greek myth, and he had over 100 kids, and she was known as the most beautiful one, and she was immortal. She was not immortal, but mortal. She was mortal, and she was known to be beautiful. This was a child that King Priam had with Hecate. And Cassandra was a twin with Helenus. That was her brother. And Hecate and King Priam's children were known to be prophetic, to have clairvoyance, and to be able to have very accurate prophecies. But Cassandra and Helenus were not born with that. And there's two different versions. One is that Apollo was so entranced by her beauty that he said if she slept with him, that he would give her the gift of prophecy. And so he gave her the gift and she said, no, I'm not going to sleep with you. And then he cursed her. The other one is that her and her brother, Helenus, when they were babies, they were sat in the temple one night of Apollo, where two serpents came and licked their ears clean in order for them to have the ability to hear the sounds of nature and to accurately be able to be prophetic and have clairvoyance. And then whenever Kassandra got older, Apollo wanted to be with her, wanted to have sex with her, and she said, no, I'm not going to do this. And he became spurned by this. He became enraged that she would not submit. How dare her not want to have sex with me? And so he spit in her mouth and he cursed her. And that curse was, no matter what your prophecies are, you are never going to be believed for it, but your brother is. And so this created this dynamic. And she had these prophecies about the Trojan War and everything. And there was one prophecy she even had about her brother Paris, that was her mom Hecabe's child, that whenever he was born, she said that he was eventually going to be killed and Troy was going to be taken over. And no one believed her. They felt like she was delusional. They didn't want to hear her. But her brother, Helenus, had the same vision. And whenever he told the family, they believed him. Whenever Troy was overtaken, and there's many prophecies that she had, by the way, but whenever Troy was taken over, she sought refuge in the temple of Athena, and she was raped by Ajax the Lesser. And it was really something that sparked a lot of debate within that community of how it was sacrilegious because it was within this temple of Athena. And no matter what, she was still viewed as crazy. So you can see how these dynamics play out in someone's chart of not being listened to, being looked at as crazy, sexual assault, all of the things within that myth, not submitting to someone else's opinion, trying to speak the truth about it, even if it's within relativity. There's all of these dynamics that can play out. So when looking at this, today, Thursday the 11th, while Mercury is conjunct the sun and it's retrograde, and all of these dynamics that I've been talking about, it's really interesting that Kassandra is about recovering it. When you look at Kassandra in the chart, you don't want to just look at Kassandra, you want to look at Venus and Mercury and our listening, expression, voice, Mercury. Inner listening is Taurus, and Venus. So this is, Kassandra is ruled by Uranus and Taurus. This conjunction is about liberating from these dynamics of being afraid to speak up, of being afraid to listen to yourself, Uranus and Taurus ruling that. Objectifying where trauma might have been created around this dynamic of feeling extremely disillusioned by people not believing you. And that Mercury retrograde in Aries conjunct the sun is illuminating this dynamic for a lot of people and is asking you to have the courage to speak up. And the lesson within that is a few things. We can speak up and we might not ever be believed, but that has nothing to do with our own self-worth. So looking at whether or not those dynamics in the past, the trauma from being honest, have affected your sense of self-worth and the need to transform that and understand this is part of Uranus and Jupiter. They're not exactly conjunct, but they're conjunct. What is a truth about you that has nothing to do with a belief that you've bought into stemming from traumatic events when you've told the truth or you had information to share and maybe you were ostracized or scapegoated or not believed or looked at as crazy. Today is the day to recover that and to recover a part of our self-esteem or where we've become fragmented from those dynamics. And so I feel like this is a very powerful signature, especially while Mercury is retrograde with the sun sitting on it, and also Uranus, the ruler of Kassandra and Pluto right now, is like liberating from the voices of others that we hear inside of our head that have created these false beliefs about ourselves stemming from these traumatic events. And then Venus ruling that in the sign of Aries is like, no, let's really take the time and create action to learn who we really are. Because we can have like, what is the word I'm looking for? When traumatic events happen like that, we can become emotionally arrested and encapsulated within that emotional dynamic, and like a stunting of our emotional growth within that area of our life can happen. And so this is about going back and retrieving that through looking at it and having the courage to do something, even if your hands are shaking and you're terrified, because it's about recovering this ability to listen to oneself, the God-given gift to have healthy self-esteem and natural expression, and to say that's really not, I'm telling you something and you can do what you want with it. And if you don't believe me, this has nothing to do with me. I did what I came here to do. I spoke what I needed to speak about. And this can also be where, on the flip side, through objectifying these dynamics, maybe there's something that now you do want to speak out about, maybe not even have a conversation with someone else, but I know someone who is a beautiful example of this. She has had so much trauma early on in life with sexual assault and her friend being murdered and not being listened to about these dynamics. And now she uses her natural resources, Taurus, her inner resources, and her voice through listening to herself about the direction she's supposed to go. And she's used those situations to now speak and give awareness around cold cases of Indigenous women who have been murdered, and just people who have cold cases here in Oklahoma, sexual assault, anything. And she humanizes them in such a way, even if they were sex workers. She will talk about how when she gives a profile of the missing person, this is someone who was doing survival sex work, or maybe they're unhoused, and she uses the word unhoused instead of homeless. And it's a natural expression of using her voice and using her inner resources from those prior traumatizing experiences as a way to recover that. So it can even be a dynamic about this, or maybe getting an idea revolving around something where in prior times you weren't heard or listened to. And so now you want to champion for that, and you want to recover your voice by doing that. So this is what I wanted to speak to for today. This is this week's astrology. It's a little bit more quiet until Monday, and I am going to do a forecast for next week. Starting with Monday, there's going to be the Mercury Chiron conjunction happening again. Venus is going to be opposing that south node. There's some really juicy kind of things that we can consciously work with, but I want us to remember this, and I want us to remember how a lot of this is catapulting off of these eclipse energies. So if you have dynamics like this coming up, this is a time to muster up your inner courage, your inner warrior or warrioress, and to follow your gut, to follow your intuition, to take responsibility for your own healing by doing maybe the thing that you're terrified to do because when you did it prior, you felt like you weren't enough, or that, people didn't believe you. This is a week to really start to recover these dynamics within ourselves and to start new, to catapult off of that Aries solar eclipse that happened on Monday. Anyway, I so enjoy you guys. Remember about my specials, and I hope to see more of you. Again, I love interacting with you. If you want to know how this is pertaining to your own life and your own evolution, come see me. I would love to see you. Anyway, have a beautiful week. As always, be gentle and kind with yourselves, and I will be here next week.